Ever wonder how many classic Hollywood legends built their fame on secrets no one dared whisper? The Golden Age wasn't just about bright lights and perfect smiles. It was about hiding the truth, sometimes in plain sight. Imagine building an empire of fame while the world watched your every move, never guessing what you were really fighting to protect. So, what happens when the hidden stories start to crack open? Stick around, because some of these secrets are about to change the way you see old Hollywood forever. Salmano. Picture a teenage rebel so cool he made James Dean look nervous. Then imagine the price he paid just to be himself. Salmano burst onto the scene in Rebel Without a Cause, instantly earning an Oscar nod and the kind of swooning fan mail that could fill a warehouse. But off-screen, Sal's life was a world of shadows and whispered rumors. While he played the bad boy on camera, he was quietly building relationships with men in a town that would have exiled him for less. Mineo never went on talk shows to explain or apologize. Instead, he lived on his own terms, even if it cost him his career. As roles dried up and the industry moved on, Sal dove into the theater world and embraced the counterculture that was finally ready to accept him. But tragedy struck. Sal was murdered outside his apartment in 1976, leaving behind a legacy of heartbreak and speculation. His story is a tough reminder. In old Hollywood, being different could mean paying the ultimate price, but it also meant being remembered for something real. Anthony Perkins. Let's talk about the man who turned showers into a national fear and made everyone second-guess their mothers. Anthony Perkins, the star of Psycho. While the world saw him as Hitchcock's ultimate villain, Anthony's own life was a maze of secrets and personal battles. Growing up in a strict family, Perkins was pushed into the spotlight young, and Hollywood wasted no time forcing him into the role of awkward heartthrob. Behind every carefully crafted smile, Perkins hid a lifetime of anxiety about being found out. Anthony's relationships with men, including dancer Grover Dale, were hidden behind a wall of studio spin and staged romances with leading ladies. Even his later marriage and fatherhood seemed like one more attempt to fit in. It wasn't until years after his death that the real story came to light, thanks to friends and loved ones who refused to let him disappear into gossip columns and rumor mills. Perkins' story is one of genius and struggle, a reminder that the real drama of Hollywood is always happening off-screen. Charles Lawton. Ever wondered what it's like to be both a legend and a ghost in your own story? Charles Lawton, Oscar winner and master of stage and screen, spent his whole career crafting unforgettable characters, all while hiding his truest self. Lawton married actress Elsa Lanchester, but their partnership was more about creative chemistry than romance. Elsa herself admitted in later years that Lawton's real life didn't match the public script. Known for roles in Mutiny on the Bounty and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Lawton created art that still echoes through film history. But off-set, he was a man constantly looking over his shoulder, never sure when the truth would come crashing down. While friends and industry insiders quietly understood his real story, the public never got more than a carefully managed illusion. Yet, Lawton's talent always spoke louder than any rumor. He proved that in a world built on make-believe, being complicated and real is the bravest act of all. Ramon Novaro. Step into the roaring 20s, when Ramon Novaro was the king of silent films and every audience member's forbidden fantasy. MGM sold Novaro as the Latin lover, all charm, no scandal. But behind the velvet curtain, Novaro's real life was anything but simple. His relationships with men were an open secret among insiders, but the studio would have done anything to keep it quiet. Novaro's story is as Hollywood as it gets. Endless parties, whispered names, and the constant pressure to perform on and off camera. He never married, instead relying on a close circle of friends who shielded him from the worst of the rumors. Tragically, it was only after his violent death that the world finally learned the real story. In the end, Novaro's life is a cautionary tale about the toll of secrets, but also a testament to resilience and style in the face of relentless scrutiny. Van Johnson's image was so squeaky clean, you'd swear he was straight out of a toothpaste commercial. MGM's Boy Next Door was the reliable hero of 30 Seconds Over Tokyo and Brigadoon, always there with a sunny smile and a crisp suit. But the truth behind Van's grin was a lot more complicated. Off-screen, Johnson lived in constant fear of exposure, thanks to a powerful studio system that cared more about box office numbers than personal freedom. Whispers about Van's relationships with men were an open secret in the right circles, but MGM wasn't about to let their golden goose get ruffled. The solution? Johnson was nudged into a studio-arranged marriage with Eve Abbott, a move designed to kill the rumors and calm nervous fans. The act fooled the public, but those in the know saw through the Hollywood charade. Johnson endured decades of double lives, publicly the perfect husband, privately seeking quiet moments of authenticity wherever he could find them. When the marriage ended, so did any attempt at pretense, but the years of forced secrecy left a mark. Van Johnson's story is a snapshot of old Hollywood's most ruthless magic trick, making reality disappear while keeping the illusion front and center. Farley Granger, handsome, sensitive, and effortlessly cool, Farley Granger was the guy everyone wanted to date and every director wanted to cast. From Alfred Hitchcock's Rope to Strangers on a Train, Granger seemed born to break hearts. But his real story was far more colorful than the Hollywood gloss. Granger lived openly with both men and women in his personal life, never settling for society's black and white rules. He found love with playwright Arthur Lawrence and director Robert Calhoun, keeping these relationships mostly private but never entirely hidden from friends. In the era of morality clauses and studio spin, Granger's willingness to just be himself, even if only behind closed doors, was quietly revolutionary. When the gossip columns tried to pigeonhole him, Farley refused to play along. Later in life, he published a memoir shattering any lingering illusions and declaring his truth for all to see. In the end, Granger's legacy isn't just his movies. It's his courage to quietly live on his own terms, even when the cameras stopped rolling. Lawrence Harvey. Lawrence Harvey's name practically drips with intrigue. Suave, mysterious, and always one step ahead of the gossip hounds, Harvey starred in films like The Manchurian Candidate and Room at the Top, making audiences swoon and critics chatter. But his personal life was as much a puzzle as any script he ever read. Harvey's relationships with both men and women kept his friends guessing and the press at bay. Hollywood was obsessed with his every move, but Harvey never bothered to clear up the rumors. He simply kept moving, both in love and in career. There were whispers of high-profile affairs and private encounters, and insiders say his openness within select circles was quietly groundbreaking. Harvey died young, at just 45, taking most of his secrets with him. But his reputation for boldness, on and off screen, still lingers. Proof that in a city of manufactured legends, some stories just can't be tamed. William Haynes. Some people break the rules. William Haynes broke the whole system, and he did it with a grin. In the 1920s and 30s, Haynes was Hollywood's first real rebel, a top box office draw and openly partnered with Jimmy Shields. The catch? Haynes refused to hide his relationship, even when MGM studio chief Louis B. Mayer issued a threat. Choose your career or your partner. Haynes chose love, turning his back on stardom rather than betray who he really was. After leaving the movies, Haynes became a star all over again, this time as a decorator to the rich and famous. He and Shields spent more than 50 years together, building a new life far from Hollywood's glare, but never far from its admiration. Haynes's refusal to bend made him a quiet icon of resistance, a rare happy ending in a business that usually punished honesty. When old Hollywood tells you no, sometimes the bravest answer is walking away. Everett Horton. You might not recognize the name, but you've definitely seen his face, the quirky butler, the nervous uncle, the comic sidekick in dozens of Golden Age classics. Everett Horton was Hollywood's go-to man for laughs, but he lived his private life out of the spotlight and far from the rumor mill. Horton shared his home with a longtime male companion, keeping things so low-key that only a handful of close friends ever got the full story. Horton's avoidance of scandal wasn't about shame, it was about survival. He knew the rules and mastered the art of flying under the radar, all while building a legacy as one of the funniest men on film. Horton's story isn't one of public crusades or grand gestures. It's about the quiet strength it takes to carve out a private world in a place that wanted to own every part of you. He proved that being true to yourself doesn't always require headlines. Sometimes it just takes knowing who you really are. John Gilgood. John Gilgood was the definition of theatrical royalty, commanding Shakespearean stages and wowing Hollywood with roles that dripped with wit and gravitas. But behind that effortless confidence was a life shadowed by public risk. In 1953, Gilgood's world turned upside down when he was arrested for improper behavior, a charge that would have ended most careers in its tracks. Instead, Gilgood faced the world with remarkable dignity. He didn't retreat, didn't grovel for forgiveness, and didn't let the headlines stop him. Instead, he returned to the stage where the applause grew louder. Friends, colleagues, and fans rallied to his side, showing that sometimes talent really does outweigh scandal. Gilgood quietly lived as he wished among friends, even if the wider world wasn't ready to listen. He outlasted the whisper campaigns, earning more honors and standing ovations than most actors could ever dream of. His story is proof that authenticity can survive even the harshest spotlights, and that sometimes the greatest triumph is simply refusing to be erased. Durk Bogard. Durk Bogard's screen presence was pure enigma, cool, distant, irresistible. He lit up British cinema in the 1950s and 60s, always hinting at more beneath the surface. Off-screen, Bogard lived with his manager, Anthony Forwood, for over 30 years, their relationship an open secret within creative circles. But the press? They were kept guessing. Bogard understood the stakes. One careless word could have ended everything. His decision to stay quiet wasn't about denial, it was strategy. Instead, Bogard used his roles to explore hidden truths, taking on films like Victim, which tackled gay themes head-on when no one else dared. In his memoirs, Bogard left the labels behind, letting readers draw their own conclusions. The real twist, even in silence, he became a beacon for others living in fear. Bogard's legacy is a masterclass in subtle rebellion, showing that sometimes the boldest move is simply surviving on your own terms. Noel Coward. If old Hollywood was a party, Noel Coward was the sharpest wit at the bar, always 2 steps ahead, always ready with a comeback that could slice glass. Coward's plays and musicals were the toast of both London and New York, his films sparkling with clever dialogue and charm. But his personal life? That was the real open secret. Coward never went public about who he loved, but he never exactly hid it either. His romances, friendships, and legendary gatherings were filled with like-minded artists and confidants, all in on the joke. He didn't need headlines. His authenticity rang out in every song, every script, every punchline. Coward taught a generation of performers that wit and honesty aren't mutually exclusive, and that there's a unique kind of freedom in simply refusing to care what others think. He turned his life into a work of art, leaving behind a blueprint for living true, no matter the times. Clifton Webb. Clifton Webb was Hollywood's most elegant bachelor, always perfectly dressed and never seen without a clever remark. In movies like Laura and Sitting Pretty, Webb played the uptight outsider, the guy who never quite fit the mold. In real life, he lived with his mother for decades, a detail that sent the gossip columns into overdrive. But Webb didn't mind being talked about. In fact, he leaned into it. He never bothered with studio-arranged romances or public denials. Instead, he built a career on playing oddballs and eccentrics, letting audiences project whatever they wanted. Close friends and colleagues knew the real story. Webb's romantic life was his own business, and he was happy to keep it that way. His legacy isn't just the films, but the confidence to live outside the lines. In a town obsessed with image, Webb proved that authenticity is the greatest scene stealer of all.